back on the subject of objective morality. This is a response video to the Cosmic Pilgrim. It's a really good video for me. It sort of rescued this argument because I had sort of given up on it. Me and Matt have been over this stuff, and it just seems improbable that we're ever going to find whatever the missing link is, whatever the uncommon link is, whatever there's, I think as human beings we are very similar, generally, and then it's just these little pieces of understanding that are different, and but it's enough of a difference. It's that line, there's 7 degrees of separation. Well, there might be just these 7 or 6 or 5 or 4 little pieces of fundamental understanding that are different between people, and they end up with, the whole perspective is changed based on that little change in angle. And then there's been comments, on some of the other videos, and people who are sort of saying, okay, I'll accept your premise. The next question is, well, how do you make any of this any use? What good is this objective morality if it can't be put into practice? And I guess I would say that I'm sort of trying to construct that. That's sort of what I'm in the process of doing. There's I'll post a link. There's a top 100 facts video series that I've been working on, and I haven't done one recently because I'm sort of trying to figure out where to go with these facts. I mean, you can always sometimes you can get too generic and you're covering, in one fact covers what could be 10 facts that you would use to build up to that one fact, and so sometimes I get too conclusive without providing the pieces that made up the conclusion. But anyways, the premise would be, let's say we have this understanding that suffering is the quanta, the thing we're trying to control, and that what we're basically trying to do is live by our morality, by this objective morality. The objective would be to live a productive life, and productivity would be defined as living a life that, in the end, that net created less suffering than it produced, or in other words, eliminated more suffering than it produced or caused. Obviously that's hard to, life is so circumstantial, so situational, and so I'd even go back to the movie example I've used a lot of times, It's a Wonderful Life, because it sort of just illustrates that, here this guy thinks his life is meaningless, useless, that he has no value to the world, and then he's shown that yes, his life was critical in the lives of these other people, and that without him in the world, the world would be a darker and uglier place. But by the same token, you change one of those variables, like in the movie, he saves his brother, who in turn saves a whole aircraft carrier or whatever in the war. But just change the scenario a little bit, as I've used this example. But what if the kamikaze he shot down, what if that pilot would have eventually cured cancer? Well, then his brother's life becomes crappy, and then his life for saving his brother's life becomes shit too. So it's so hard to sit there and say ahead of time, we don't get to front seat drive our lives in a lot of ways. It's very hard to do, but it's doable in principle. And I guess principles is what it's really based on, is that once you know what the objective is, then it's all just a matter of principles, which are basically a definition of a probability. What is likely to produce what result? And so you can you know, you can know the obvious. You know, if you don't, violence is generally a bad thing. Don't do it. You know, lying is a bad thing generally. Don't do it. If you know you're using somebody to get something, well, it's likely not to be doing them any good, so don't do it. Selfish, acting out of self-interest. It's likely that you're exploiting something or using something if you're acting that way, so don't do it. But obviously this is all circumstantial. It's all based on situations, and there's always exceptions to the principal rule. And so there's nothing you can, it's not like religion where you can just say, okay, here's, live the good life, have the right intent, and it doesn't matter what the results are, as long as your intent is good, you got a ticket into heaven. You know, in this reality, you don't get the free ride on good intentions. You really have to do, the end product has to be what it has to be. But obviously, if your intentions are good, the likelihood is that your product will be good. So at least having good intentions is likely a first step to achieving the productive end. But it does get, you know, the question about that you raised in terms of your own conditional happiness and its role played in it is your own welfare, as I've said in the other videos, is part of the equation. I mean, you obviously have to maintain yourself in a comfortable enough state of mind for your own life to be worth living. It's not a requirement. I'm just saying it's just that that's likely that you're going to need to not be suffering yourself to have a life that in net produces less, eliminates more suffering than it causes. I mean, if you end up causing yourself a great deal of pain through living your life, that's part of the accounting you have to make at the end. You somehow have to compensate for the pain you experience. So the things you do produce have to be more valuable than the pain you caused yourself in living your life. I mean, obviously you can be, you could give yourself as a life of service, but you got to make sure that your service is productive, or the you know, the toll you imposed on yourself for it, you know, can't be justified. The other side of the coin is that this morality would also, you know, kind of imposes a theoretical obligation to be self-sacrificing in the right circumstances, because if there's a huge gain to be made and for a small cost from yourself, then you're sort of obligated to, you know, pay the price. But there's no strict obligation, you know. It's only there's a minimum requirement, I suppose. I mean, there's obviously no one's required to do anything. No one's required to be productive. But if you know, but even productivity comes in levels. I mean, you have to. You can get to the net of 0, or you can be a +1, or you can be a +5, or you can be a +6 million. It just, you know, you can be anywhere on that scale. But obviously you want to be somewhere, you know, in the black numbers. You want to be somewhere positive. You don't want to be living a net negative life in the end. I mean, somewhere you want to at least be an asset. You want your existence to have been a good thing, for the world to be a better place for your existence. That's what you want. How good is sort of up to you and the choices that are presented in front of you. I could argue, let's just do some hypotheticals. Let's say, I mean, you used the genocides and the, you know, forced starvations, the rest of it that go on in Africa. Well, what if, you know, let's use the war even in Iraq as an example. What if there was an opportunity where if you got shot or killed, it would end the war? I mean, wouldn't your moral obligation be to say, okay, I'll give my life to end this horror that's going on, this awfulness. And so, you know, we're not that we ever really get those kind of decisions or choices in our life. We really aren't provided the opportunity to do, you know, to just, you know, jump on a grenade and save humanity. We're not too often presented with the opportunity to be a hero or to maximize our potential to do great good. But there's all these little circumstances in our lives